2017. And one of those things is that we now have millennials and Generation Z in our young professional workforce. So this video is complementary to give you all of the information that you need to effectively manage the Generation Z employees who you have reporting to you. The Generation Z employees were born between 2001 and 2020. And this generation is typically the children of our millennials. So they were raised to be very independent and to figure out things for themselves. Interestingly, in the year 2026, it's estimated that there will be 82 million Generation Z people across the world, which would make them the largest generation in 2026. Now, while they're still really early in their education, they are absolutely on track to be the most well-educated generation. And they are incredibly diverse, both racially, ethnically, in their sexual orientation. And I think an interesting thing about this generation is past generations, we've looked at diversity as something we tolerate or something that we strive for or that we include or even accept it. And the Generation Z employees expect it. They expect diversity, inclusion, belonging to be the typical experience and not something that is a benefit or a nice to have in the workplace. Company cultures that attract these young professionals are those that have very diverse and inclusive cultures. So they don't just want to hear about diversity and inclusion and see the programs. They want to see it. They want to see it across the leadership team. They want to see it in the diverse slate of candidates for open positions, and they want to see processes in place that make sure that we are absolutely not only diverse today, but that that's going to continue into the future. Another trend we see with the Generation Z employees is mental wellness as a company priority is very, very important to them. And that includes paying a livable wage. It includes the ability to manage their schedules so that they can take time off as needed and to have emotional and psychological safety inside of the workplace. They're also incredibly entrepreneurial. So you'll find a big entrepreneurial spirit with this generation. They were raised with the area of Uber and Airbnb, and they have seen so many small companies take off and become global organizations. In fact, 72% of Generation Z say that they want to start their own business someday, and they really thrive in environments that are more entrepreneurial. So those cultures that allow them to really grow and act as an entrepreneur inside of the company to create exciting new products, services, and to use their creative thinking to further the company mission and the goals of the company. Historical events that shape their thinking include the COVID pandemic. Let's talk a little bit about that one, because the COVID pandemic has been something that affected this group in terms of loss of jobs more than any other generation. About a third of Gen Z employees lost a job during the crisis, compared to about 13 to 19% for other generations. Another thing that has shaped their thinking is constant connectivity to social media. Our millennials were certainly connected, not in the same deep way where they're constantly connected to social media as the Gen Z employees are. A couple of other things that have impacted their thinking are climate change concerns, terrorism and war, and the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage. Their core values tend to be a really tight connection to diversity and belonging, and they highly value financial security. Gen Z employees are also going to be very focused on environmental protection and collective good. So really being involved in companies and programs that are focused on securing our environment and creating a better living environment for everyone on the planet. Their approach to money tends to be they don't like a lot of debt. They've seen their millennial parents go into debt with school loans and other things, and they've seen deep debt right, in that generation. And so they are focused on saving. They're much more likely to create a budget and stick to it than their millennial peers or the Gen X generation that sometimes are also their parents. So many of them use peer-to-peer marketplaces to make extra money. So things like Shopify or Etsy, where they make up to $10,000 per year above traditional wages. And this group is very comfortable paying extra money for the luxury items that they want to have in their lives. When it comes to work ethic, they are focused on gathering a variety of skills versus specialization in one career track. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that they do have that entrepreneurial mindset, and they have really, really high engagement when the organizational values or the values around the project that they're working on match their personal core values. Something to think about when we're thinking about the difference between the generations is the amount of technology development that has happened between our traditionalists. So think about, when our traditionalists were born and their upbringing, and now Gen Z. It is so extremely different that we now have completely different life experiences along that whole spectrum of the generations. When our baby boomers first got jobs, a computer at each desk what still wasn't even a thing. And millennials and Gen Z have never known a world without that. So our Gen Z employees are basically born with a cell phone in their hands. So to really attract and retain them, you're going to want to have a really smooth process for interviewing and onboarding, how they sign up for their benefits, where it's very easy for them to use technology, not just the technology on the computer, but the technology on their smartphones, so that they can, connect with the things that are important in their lives. And for this generation, when you're managing them, you want to connect early and often. And I know we've talked about the importance of the weekly one-on-ones in the past. For these young professionals, having those weekly meetings and connecting with them, really learning about them and just what's going on in their lives is absolutely vital. And because they've been really tied to technology, they like short communications. So very clear, very crisp. For example, those long corporate emails might get a quick glance, but they're not going to read them to absorb them or look for that information that's buried inside. So those communications have got to be super crisp and to the point. Face-to-face and personal discussions are the best way to communicate with this group. Face-to-face, one-on-one, small groups, that's when you're really going to connect, and they're going to be able to absorb information in a very robust way versus trying to get that to them in a long email. And their first work experiences that they have had have been very flexible in terms of when and where they work. Many of these young professionals have begun their professional career during the time of COVID, where there's massive flexibility. So think about how you can create that flexibility for all of your workforce, and just know that for your Gen Z employees, this is going to be absolutely critical. Working with young professionals is such a joy. We get so many great ideas, we get their creativity, and when we can learn how to harness that, they bring that entrepreneurial spirit inside of our organizations, which is super exciting. So take a look at the guide that I have for working with the generations. I've got the high-level notes on your Gen Z employees, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the things that you're doing to engage your young professionals and increase the stickiness with your customers and create really exciting new products and services.
Becoming a manager will require a new skill set and a shift of focus as you go from specialist to manager. I want to share with you some of the key distinctions, some of the key shifts in focus and skill set between being that specialist and being a great manager. Firstly, let's look at results. As a specialist, you get your results through personal efforts and often in cooperation together with other teams. As a manager, your results will come through other people. So through others, instead of just through personal efforts and cooperating with other teams, you will have to shift to thinking of acquiring your results through other people. When it comes to productivity, as a specialist, it's all about your personal productivity, whilst as a manager, you focus on the productivity of a team and the individuals in that team. Your relationship to a team. As a specialist, you're often a member of some sort of a team. As a manager, it's all about building effective and successful teams. So again, a key shift here in relation to teams. When it comes to planning, as a specialist, you plan your own work for personal success. As a manager, you plan the team's work and you plan for performance management. The development focus as a specialist is about your own production and the skills related to your own production. That's what you focus on developing. Whilst as a manager, you focus on developing your management and leadership characteristics. Further, let's look at specific skills. A specialist will primarily have primary technical or professional skills related to their production, to their work, and also some skills when it comes to cooperating with others in those teams that we talked about previously. A manager, on the other hand, the main skills would be including planning when it comes to managing other people, to be able to plan their work and managing other people. Assigning work, so figuring out who's going to do what work to be most effective. Coaching and counseling, being able to relate to people and lead them in a way that awakens their inner resources and makes them be there and do their very best. Another key skill as a manager is being able to measure the work of others, so you can quantify it and measure it to provide accurate feedback to the individual and to the organization. And also hiring and firing, recruiting is a key part of this, learning to recruit good people for your team. And also times we will have to have that talk about a challenging topic when you need to fire someone is most likely also going to be part of your skill set for your management career. When it comes to time, as a specialist, you focus on completing your own tasks on time. That's your main focus, and you put in a full effort all day. Well, hopefully, there might be some breaks in between there. And also being on time is a key definition of a specialist's relationship to time. Looking at the manager, the shift that occurs here is related to time, that you start working more in annual cycles and thinking in annual cycles, not just the project cycles, but also in the long term. And another key thing related to time, making sure you make time available for others within your work schedule. So you create that space where you are available to other people. Otherwise, you might end up in that trap where either your people can never get a hold of you, or you're totally overworking those 70, 80-hour work weeks. So you need to allot time to make it available for other people. And finally, what does a specialist value in the best case scenario? A specialist would value accepting the company culture and practices, exhibiting a professional pride in their work that they do, and also would value prudent use of company resources, meaning using the materials and the resources at hand in a prudent and proper way. A manager, on the other hand, would value things like managerial work, moving away from that specialist stuff working on just on your own task, but valuing actually managing other people and helping others to accept the company values. That would also be a key aspect of what a good manager values, helping other people to understand and to accept the company values and culture. And also a key value for a manager to have is valuing success through others, moving away from just personal, your own success, but moving into highly valuing being able to achieve success through and with other people. There are many myths related to becoming a manager, and several of them are simply not true. Believing in these myths or acting upon them is a common reason why new managers fail in their role. Because the myths are incomplete and overly simplistic, they lead you to neglect key leadership responsibilities. It is common among new managers in their new role to expect to gain authority. Instead, they find themselves surrounded by interdependencies. They expect feeling free, but instead they feel constrained. This is especially true if they were used to the relative freedom and independence of a high performer. These interdependencies that new managers are surrounded by are a web of relationships. Not only with your team members, but also with your bosses, other managers on the same level as yourself, as well as other people outside and inside your organization. All these people make a series of demands on you. Demands which can often be conflicting. This can lead to daily routines that are experienced as hectic, pressured, and fragmented. To quote one new manager, "The fact is that you really are not in control of anything. The only time I am in control is when I shut my door. And then I feel I am not doing the job I'm supposed to be doing, which is being with the people." If you cling to that myth of authority, you will not be able to lead effectively as a manager. It is vital that you learn to accept the interdependencies, the relationships that come with the role, and that you're willing to learn to play that game well. There can definitely be power associated with being a manager, even with these interdependencies. The problem is just what you consider to be the source of that power. It is a mistake to believe that the source of this power is formal authority, that the power comes from your new position in the organizational hierarchy. This belief leads many new managers to take on a very hands-on, autocratic approach. Not because the new manager is eager to exercise their new power over people, but because he or she thinks this is the most effective way to produce the expected results. Following a few painful experiences, the new manager comes to the somewhat unsettling insight that the source of power is not about formal authority. Instead, that source of power comes from establishing trust, respect, and credibility with team members, peers, and superiors. In the words of another new manager, "It took me 3 months to realize I had no effect on many of my people. It was like I was talking to myself." Let's look at some more of these common myths of being a new manager. Myth number 1. The new role is characterized by authority. Finally, I have the freedom to implement my ideas. Reality. The new role is characterized by interdependence. It is humbling that someone who works for me could get me fired. Myth number 2. The source of power is formal authority. I will now be on top of the ladder. Reality. The source of power is informal trust, respect, and credibility. Folks were cautious, and you really had to earn it. Myth number 3. The desired outcome is control. I must get compliance from my subordinates. Reality. The desired outcome is commitment. Compliance does not equal commitment. Myth number 4. The sole managerial focus is to manage one-on-one. My role is to build relationships with individual subordinates. Reality. The managerial focus should also be about leading the team. I need to create a culture that will allow the team to fulfill its potential. Myth number 5. The key challenge is keeping the operation in working order. My job is to make sure the operation runs smoothly. Reality. The key challenge is making changes that will make the team perform better. I am responsible for initiating changes to enhance the team's performance.